In our video on secret Jedi romances, we went over how Jedi were discouraged from developing powerful attachments to other people. Strong emotional bonds were seen as pathways of temptation that led to the dark side. At the same time, however, anyone who's ever consumed any form of Star Wars media could immediately tell you that there were few bonds stronger than the bond that developed between Master and Padawan. Practically every pair of Master and Apprentice that we saw in canon, and many we saw in Legends, very openly cared for one another, even loved each other, and yet the Jedi Order never seemed to have a problem with that despite their policy on no attachments. If anything, they openly embraced it. In today's video, we're going to analyze the bond that developed between a Jedi Master and their Padawan, as well as delve into the darker truth behind its support and even encouragement by the Jedi Order.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Time and time again, Star Wars has shown us that the relationship between a Master and their Padawan wasn't just one between a teacher and their student. It went so much deeper than that and encompassed so many complicated feelings. Even among the Jedi, it was considered a sacred bond, so much that in the Golden Age of the Republic, a Master could only take on one Padawan at a time so that they could devote their complete attention to them. Tales of the Jedi recently gave us a glimpse into one such pair. Dooku, who many believe to be a cold and calculating person, is shown to care deeply for Qui-Gon Jinn, his former Padawan. Throughout the series, he is shown to respect him, to the point he calls Jinn a better man than I. Much more than respect, however, Dooku loved Qui-Gon. The pain in his expression when he realizes Qui-Gon had encountered Maul and the guilt of betraying his beloved apprentice were evident on his face, but both pale in comparison to the defeated despair he showed after his death. Count Dooku, of all people, stood reminiscing about his Padawan's boyhood and felt such grief that he didn't even attend the funeral. Anyone watching the series could clearly tell that Qui-Gon's death really pushed Dooku over the edge, from feeling guilt at betraying the Jedi to wanting to take down the corrupt council whose inaction had claimed his Padawan's life. But canon has given us far, far better examples than Dooku and Qui-Gon's. We can never make this video without talking about the OG Master and Padawan pair, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. After Qui-Gon's death, Obi-Wan took Anakin on as his Padawan and raised him to knighthood. Even after Anakin was knighted, they were often deployed together during the Clone Wars. They were almost a package deal, where council duties didn't call Obi-Wan elsewhere. As we saw in Tales of the Jedi, after a Padawan was knighted, they were free to pursue their own path. They didn't have to stick by their master, as evidenced by Qui-Gon living his best life. During their talks, Dooku hadn't even met Qui-Gon's Padawan in person. Compare that relationship to Anakin and Obi-Wan, who not only kept going out on missions with his Padawan, but took an active role in raising Anakin's own Padawan, Ahsoka. Being knighted didn't separate the two, it made them stronger. So much so that they considered each other family. We can never forget the heartbreaking duel on Mustafar, when Obi-Wan proclaimed, "You are my brother, Anakin. I loved you." Let's take a look at a passage from the novelization of Revenge of the Sith that shows a conversation between Obi-Wan and Padme. "Senator, Padme, please." He gazed into her eyes with nothing on his face but compassion and fatigued anxiety. "I am not blind, Padme, though I have tried to be, for Anakin's sake, and for yours." "What do you mean?" "Neither of you is very good at hiding feelings, either." "Obi-Wan, Anakin has loved you since the day you met, in that horrible junk shop on Tatooine. He's never even tried to hide it, though we do not speak of it. We pretend that I don't know. And I was happy to, because it made him happy. You made him happy, when nothing else ever truly could." He sighed, his brows drawing together. "And you, Padme. Skilled as you are on the Senate floor, cannot hide the light that comes to your eyes when anyone so much as mentions his name." From this passage, we can see that the love between Obi-Wan and Anakin was so strong that it was enough for Obi-Wan to knowingly break the rules he so loyally upheld, to the point of sacrificing his own happiness with Duchess Satine. Yet for Anakin, he turned a blind eye and allowed a flagrant breach of the Order's rules to continue, all because it made his Padawan happy, and that meant more than anything to him. This is the most glaring example of an emotional attachment between Master and Padawan that was enough to sway the Jedi from their duty, but it was by no means the only one. By all accounts, such bonds should have been problematic in the eyes of the Jedi, but instead, they were encouraged. Before we discuss why the Order tolerated such powerful attachments, despite the clear risks they entailed, we need to explain why such a strong bond formed in the first place. A Jedi's journey began when they were barely a few years old. Force-sensitive children were taken from their parents and homeworlds when they were around 3 to 4 years old and raised in the Jedi Temple in specialized nurseries known as creches. During the childhood, Jedi younglings were brought up alongside their fellow students and looked after by minders, whose jobs it was to ensure the children's well-being. Younglings did everything together. They ate, slept, trained, and played together from the moment they arrived at the temple. This was because in the early stages of their Jedi training, it was just as important for the younglings to develop a sense of belonging and family as it was for them to learn the basics of the Force and lightsaber. Many would argue that, if anything, it was more important for them to develop this attachment to the Jedi Order, as skills could always be practiced later on. Early childhood attachments couldn't be made up for later in life. This is precisely why the Council hesitated so much to allow Anakin into the Order at the age of 9. He had spent his formative years becoming attached to his mother and friends back on Tatooine, not the Jedi. And to their credit, they were right. Even after being raised by the Jedi from that point on, Anakin never forgot about his mother, continuing to love and care about her even as a Jedi Knight. This, as we'll discuss soon, was not a good thing. Around their tween years, younglings were taken on by older, more experienced Jedi and became their Padawan, and their connection began before the apprenticeship even became official. Masters were encouraged to take on a Padawan, and due to there being so many, Padawan often competed in games to attract the attention of a master, but this wasn't always the case. Time and again, we saw masters taking on a student that they felt drawn to somehow, as if they were being guided by the Force. This sense of destiny created a strong basis for the bond that would develop between Master and Padawan, but it was time that really cemented the deal. Once a young Jedi became a Padawan, they spent about a decade learning directly under their new master. They shared meals, trained together, they discussed philosophy and traveled the galaxy. They went on missions and trusted each other with their backs, and this decade of close contact and continuous interaction took place during the Padawan's teenage years, which is some of the most important in a person's emotional development. Until then, a young Jedi had never known a parental figure. They had minders and teachers, but they were but one youngling in a class. They rarely had a tight bond with any of their guardians, and so the attachments they developed were primarily with their fellow students, attachments of camaraderie and friendship. Under a master, however, Padawan knew what it was like to have a parent for the first time, someone who took care of them above all else, who raised and taught them right from wrong. From the master's perspective, they were entrusted with a young life that they had not only to protect from the dangers of the galaxy, but also raise to be a good Jedi who knew right from wrong. It was never possible for such a pair to not develop strong familial bonds of love, and the Order knew it. So, why would they create such a system? Why not just continue training Padawan in groups until they graduated as Jedi Knights? The truth, unfortunately, is that it depends on the Jedi you asked. To some Jedi, the Order was essentially a cult they could exploit to promote their own ideology. As a whole, the Jedi came together around a set of core beliefs younglings were taught from a young age. Certain Jedi exploited this system and the vulnerability of children to indoctrinate them into their twisted belief system, just like Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma had done during the Great Sith War. These Jedi supported taking children so young, then raising them in groups in order to create the strongest possible attachment to the Order. By raising them in a group as children, these extremist Jedi ensured their younglings saw the Order as their family. Later on, when they took students on as Padawan, they isolated key targets they believed they could mold in their image and focused on them. As you mentioned above, adolescence is when a person develops some of their most dominant personality traits and moral values. Children need attention, and teenagers even more so. The system of raising students in communal classes could only continue for so long before they risked the young Jedi feeling disillusioned or replaceable, just one more face in a crowd. Their unique relationship with their master made them feel like an important part of the Jedi Order. It validated their feelings and efforts and gave them a sense of purpose, a parental figure to make proud. And that was precisely the type of bond certain extremist Jedi sought to exploit. However, the Jedi Order did not share these beliefs. Instead, they tolerated these powerful relationships because they were simply not considered a problem. As we discussed in a past video, the approach the Jedi took to training their younger members was actually designed to protect their students from the dark side as much as possible. To begin with, we've already explained why it was an unavoidable necessity to start training Jedi as young as possible. At this stage, younglings were raised communally because due to their emotional needs and the stage of development they were at, it would have been impossible for a young child to be raised by a single master without creating a powerful bond of dependence and love, much like an infant towards their parent. Later on, when the student was deemed mature enough to manage their relationship with their masters responsibly, they were given to a single master to train them. Yes, in the past, masters trained groups of Padawan. However, examples such as Exar Kun that we mentioned above proved that this older system divided the master's attention, leading them to miss the signs of their students falling to the dark side. A single Padawan under a master meant the teacher was able to devote all their attention to nurturing their student while focusing on their individual needs. Additionally, it's worth noting that most master-student relationships didn't fit the Jedi's definition of attachment, which was closer to what we'd consider a possessive relationship. Jedi, Padawan, and masters were usually able to let each other go when need be. They had to, obviously, when the student reached knighthood, which was intentional and meant to teach the students who were prone to attachment to let go. That wouldn't be considered an attachment in the Jedi's sense, as it didn't interfere with service to the will of the Force. Cases in which genuine attachments formed between master and student, as between Anakin and Obi-Wan, weren't the norm and were frowned upon by the Council, though dealt with gently. The Revenge of the Sith novel itself goes into this a few times, presenting Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship as an abnormality that Yoda and Mace Windu disapproved of, but tolerated because they didn't think it was a terribly big issue. So, there you have it. While some Jedi may have abused their bond with their Padawan to twist them to their own dogma, most Jedi simply didn't think it was ever a problem, as the system was designed to protect students from the dark side while teaching them to let go. Do you think the Jedi should have been more wary? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.